Welcome to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast, where we explore real leadership stories and strategies to help inspire meaningful action and purpose. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out, this podcast will help you lead with intent, build trust, and strengthen relationships in your organization. I'm Eric Savickas, and I bring over 30 years' experience in leadership, whether it be through my time as a U.S. Army officer or an university instructor, or now as a leadership coach to the fire service. Today, I'm excited to have Chief Jim Klug with us. Chief Klug's been with Platte Valley Fire Protection District since 2016, first serving as the Operations and Training Chief, and before stepping into the role of Fire Chief in April 2022. With over 25 years of experience in emergency services, his career began in Wisconsin, then took him here to Milliken Fire Protection District here in Colorado, and then on to Frederick Firestone Fire Protection District, also here in Colorado, eventually reaching Platte Valley Fire Protection District, where he is now. We're going to hear about his leadership journey, some challenges he's faced along the way, and his vision for Platte Valley Fire. Chief Klug, thank you very much for joining us today.
You bet, Eric. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I'm excited to get to talk to you and dig into different aspects of leadership and your journey along the way. Let's start out with your journey, if we could. What got you first interested in the fire service, and what sparked that to eventually bring you to where you are today as a fire chief?
All right. Well, I grew up in a firehouse. My dad was the assistant chief of the Burnett Fire Department back in Wisconsin. Small town volunteer department. But I pretty much lived there, a lot of nights and weekends with my dad. I was there on, different training nights. If they got a fire call and my dad left, man, I was on my bike pedaling as fast as I could to get there to watch the fire trucks leave. And as I got older, I'd listen to the radio. And if I knew they were going to be coming back for water, I'd have hoses hooked up and ready to fill the truck. So I've really been hooked on this career since just being a little guy. I hit 18 years old. I joined the department the day I turned 18. And then after that, our organization didn't have, any specific training rules as far as academy or anything like that. But I jumped on a academy through Moraine Park Technical College there, went through it with two of my best friends who were on a neighboring organization. And man, I, again, just hooked again. However, I actually never imagined doing this as a job. At that point, where I grew up, it was all small towns, Dairyland, Wisconsin. The only career departments you really knew of were Madison and Milwaukee and places like that. And for whatever reason, I never looked at that as a career opportunity. It wasn't until I moved to Colorado and got started here that I really realized, hey, there's a lot of opportunity in this as a career. I got on Milliken Fire Department originally as a volunteer. They had some minimal day staff, career people, and that's where my first career opportunity came. And that's where Chief Klug gave me my first career fire job and really my first opportunity to lead in that organization. Went from there to Frederick Firestone. I worked under Chief Poziewak, who, in my opinion, is an outstanding leader and really refined, I'm going to say, some of the leadership skills that I felt like I came with. And then from there came to Platte Valley, and really here was my first opportunity to, I want to say, lead in my way. I was given a lot of leeway. And I think it was my first opportunity to really lead in my way and be the leader that I wanted to be, I guess.
Nice.
And then I became the fire chief, and now I'm for sure in a position to kind of to do it my way, I guess. And when I say that, I don't mean that in a bad way, but truly, I've worked for different types of leaders over the years, and in the back of your mind, you always have I would do that different if I was given the opportunity, and now I was given the opportunity. So.
Yeah. So as you progress through those different departments, from starting out in Wisconsin and then making the move to Colorado, probably because the skiing is better than the Dells there in Wisconsin. But once you get through these different departments, were you looking for specific opportunities to progress and advance, or was it more of a calculation of call volume or different from structure to more of a wildland, or from volunteer to combination to full paid? Like what was your mindset as you were changing departments? Because I know, or I assume, just like in the military, every new unit or every new department is a new opportunity, but it also, to some degree, you've got to reestablish yourself and you've got to start over. You've got to learn the culture. You've got to, go through all of those things. And so that's a challenge in and of itself. What was the thought for you?
I don't know that my reasoning was necessarily any of that. I was never chasing a bigger paycheck. I was never chasing higher call volume or anything like that. I'm a small town guy, and that's really what I enjoy. I would say that opportunity sought me out actually with each of those moves. I was the training. I was a daytime captain at Milliken, and that was the career staffing we had. Volunteers picked up all the weekend and night coverage, and my project assignment was training. So I was the training officer for the organization, and I loved what I did. I was very active in training there. I was instructing and being a academy lead at Ames Community College at the same time. I truly love what I did. And I was teaching or coordinating an academy that had the EMS division chief from Frederick Firestone in it. And so he and I just started conversing and having conversations during that academy, and they ended up posting for a training lieutenant position. So I guess he really kind of started to sell what their organization had to offer. And really it was opportunity for me to grow and develop. I think that got me to go from Milliken to there. And then I spent 8 years at Frederick Firestone. And again, I worked with great people. It was a great organization, really not any complaints there. I wasn't job hunting again. When one day I got a phone call from a friend of mine that was at Platte Valley that said, "Hey, there's this opportunity coming up for an operations and training chief. Do you think you'd have any interest in that?" I'm like, "Well, maybe." And then I got another phone call from a mentor of mine, not at Platte Valley, but a mentor of mine, that said, "Hey, I hear there's this opportunity coming up at Platte Valley. Would you have any interest in it? I think you'd be great." And so it really got me thinking about it. And I came out here and I met with the fire chief and kind of got a feel for what they would be looking for. I wasn't applying, just kind of wanted to know what direction they would be going. And man, what they described and what I observed while I was here excited me, I guess, and made the move.
So you mentioned that mentor of yours, and that's a great segue into just the topic of mentorship. I know in the fire service, a lot of departments institute a more formal mentorship program as a way to develop their firefighters and their engineers into fire officers and then beyond. But I think often the more powerful mentorship, and it sounds like it's the case with you as well, the more powerful mentorship is that informal mentorship where you resonate with somebody, maybe somebody that you just met through networking, or maybe it was somebody that you worked with but no longer work with. But that relationship, that mentorship really, really sticks with you and gives you some good lessons learned. How has the example of your mentors coming up in the way they approached giving you advice and saying, try this, or maybe put yourself out there for that, or maybe check out this new department or this other department? How has that kind of then become imbued within you and shape the way that you now mentor others and lead others?
Yeah. So I've got a couple of good mentors that have helped me through this career and really have gotten me to where I am, sometimes pushing me out of my comfort zone, encouraged me to do it. And there's even been times where I've been signed up for things that I would never have said yes to, but now I'm signed up for it. Right. And I have to jump in and do it. And it's all been very good for me in my growth and my career. I think a lot of the way they would mentor me, down to, they observed something that I said or something that I did somewhere, and I've gotten simple text messages, "Hey, why would you do whatever it was?" Or, "Hey, how does that align with your organization's values?" And why was that important to do or something like that, right? So just those little things that they send you to make you think. And I think I do the same thing with some of my folks here. You know, I'm trying to push them outside of their comfort zone. I have a career development plan that by a certain rank in the organization, they have to become a member in some sort of outside group, right? Whether that's, say, the Training Officers Association or something like that. I would say somewhat force them out to find a mentor. So for my battalion chief positions, those are new. And when we started with those, I think, a year in officially, they had to go do rides with other battalion chiefs at other organizations. And there was one that I required all of them to go ride with, and the rest they could choose. It was whoever they wanted to reach out to. And my hope in that was, one, to learn lessons and watch another battalion chief work. But I was really hoping that they would find a connection with somebody out there that would become a resource for them, a mentor for them to reach out, because, you know, these positions aren't easy, and we all need somebody out there to offer us advice or to push us or whatever it is. So I feel like I'm using a lot of what my mentors did for me to try to encourage our folks here.
One thing that you mentioned that perked my ears up, and you actually mentioned it twice, is that a good mentor pushed you. And that reminded me, I had a mentor one time that, you know, I was asking, I forget what the context of the thing that I was asking about or trying to get advice about. And he simply said, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And he clearly wasn't talking about physical fear, you know, fear of an upcoming deployment, combat deployment, or something that I would put myself out there and get physically injured by. He was talking about the fear of my own headspace, or that I was creating, hesitating to do a thing for fear of being judged, or maybe it would not go as well as I thought it would go. And him simply asking, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" freed me up. Like, it was like, well, obviously, I said to him, well, obviously, if I wasn't afraid, I would do X, Y, and Z. And he just looked at me and he said, "Why don't you do it?" Right? And like, it's that kind of thing that a good mentor pushes you a little bit outside your comfort zone, but still knows where the left and right limits are, and allows you to do things and frees up that kind of your own mental block and that your own headspace to put yourself in positions where you might not otherwise do it. And I really love that when you said your good mentors push you, and hopefully you push your folks at this point.
Hope so.
Yeah. So you became fire chief at Platte Valley Fire during a transitional period, I think you would define it as. What were some of those challenges that you faced in stepping into that role? And then probably one of your biggest challenges straight away was, how do we stabilize things so that we can get some traction and then move forward?
Had my share of challenges, Eric. I can assure you of that. So first, some personal challenges, right? And then similar to what we were just talking about, is, am I really up for this? Am I the right guy for this position? And am I capable of doing that? And I think a lot of that is normal fear, right? That's seeking discomfort, taking that step and stepping into something, the unknown, essentially, stepping into the unknown. So I had to battle that a little bit. And then also I've always promised myself, you know, I've worked for multiple leaders over the years, and you know, you learn as much from the not great leaders as you do from the good leaders, if not more. And, you know, I've worked for some leaders over the years that I always said that they buried their head in the sand when challenges or problems arose and they didn't deal with it. And I always promised myself that I would never be that leader, right? So one of the personal challenges I had was, there were things to fix, and the buck stops with me now. There's nobody above me to pass this problem on to. I have to deal with it. So I struggled with that at the beginning, because there were hard challenges and hard decisions that had to be made. Organizationally, we weren't in a great spot, at least not in my thinking. We had a very negative atmosphere. We had very good people that worked at this organization, very, very skilled and passionate firefighters that had moved on. And I know that there was a group of others that were ready to move on. Honestly, myself included. There was some toxic leadership in our organization at a few different levels. And they had some loyal followers, which adds to that challenge when you're trying to work through that. Let's see. So I wanted to work on communication and making sure that I was communicating clearly and consistently to overcome some of those things. I had to establish a vision for this organization that I felt like we were just doing the same thing every day. We weren't headed in any direction. There was no goal that we were trying to meet. We would just jump at good ideas. So, working through some of the challenges that come with that. Let's see, there was fear. So, every time leadership changes in an organization, there's fear, right? Even if the person coming in, it's different than what you're used to. So there was some fear with that. I mentioned I had to take care of some personnel issues. And even though our folks worked with me for 6 years before that and knew who I was and knew my leadership, when you make a personnel change or let somebody go from the organization, it starts a whole new level of fear. And even though they've worked with you, there's now this fear of, am I next? Or you know what I mean? I took that very personally. That honestly, it hurt my heart. So working through some of that with our folks and reassuring them that of where we were headed, essentially. We had people that weren't bad people. They maybe just weren't on board with what the vision was for our organization. And I kept repeating, probably maybe overly repeating. And there were times where I felt like maybe I'm a bad leader for even saying this, but I kept repeating that this is the direction that we're going. And if you're not on board, I encourage you to find happiness elsewhere. Mm. And we had several individuals that I think took that to heart and they found happiness elsewhere, and I was happy for them, and they're doing very well, and we're doing very well as well.
Yeah, and even though you said that like some of those decisions hurt your heart, which I'm sure they do. I mean, leaders are committed to their people, and you have certainly personal relationships with the folks that you're there in the department with. But it's almost not to turn it into a math equation, right? But if you've got a department of X number of people operate with a certain number of them operating at an 80% capacity, and then by addition through subtraction, if you make the hard call, which is going to be a challenge, and you're probably going to question yourself to say, man, this may not work out at all, right? Things could get worse, and they probably do get worse before they get better. But through that addition through subtraction, now you've got committed people that are closer to the 100% commitment. And maybe it did. Did it get worse before it got better? And then have you seen the exponential growth since then?
Yeah. So I would say it sure did. It got a little bit worse before it got better. I said that transition took years off my life. That's probably more true than I care for it to be. But we are in such a better place today with the right people that fit our organization and are on board with what we're trying to do. So absolutely a much better place.
Yep. Good. And that's good to hear. So I met you years back when you were the training officer, training chief. Do you think being the training chief has given you additional tools that make you a better fire chief? And what specifically might come to mind from that training experience that fuels you with a certain mindset now? Even though the fire chief is a more well-rounded position, obviously you've got to be, somewhat of an expert in a lot of things. How did the training serve you well in now that transition to fire chief?
Yeah, I think I think being in training in your career would be beneficial for everybody. Specifically for fire chief, how did it benefit me? Well, a good majority of my career was in training, and it's all about developing people. And even in the fire chief position right now, I may not be always directly developing people, but I'm leading that development, so to speak, for our people and our organization. And then I think if you're actively involved in training, you're also out there and you're meeting and interacting and networking with other people outside of your organization from across the state, from across the country. And so the experiences that you're gaining and the insight that you gain from those other people, I think comes back and directly affects your organization or helps your organization, right? And so again, as the fire chief, I think you bring those experiences and the knowledge and the what do I want to say, the shared experiences back with you, and you utilize that in your decision making, in the way that you lead. I think sometimes it's also helpful just to get that exterior view of other organizations, right? To look at your own organization and go, hey, I think we're doing pretty good comparatively. Or if you're struggling with where you're at and you look at some other similar organizations, to be able to look back at yours and go, we're on par, or maybe we're doing better than I thought we were. So I think training is a very beneficial position. I think that's why a lot of organizations make rotations through training a part of their process, because you will learn a skill set, you will develop yourself, you'll develop your leadership, and I think it sets you up for success in the rest of your career.
I think that's interesting that you mentioned the rotation through training. My experience in the military, and as I've tried to understand the fire service since then, is that the military makes a deliberate effort that you're on the line, and then you're going to do some time, at least as an officer, you're going to do some time in a staff position, then you're going to rotate back, then you're going to do your time again in another staff position, then you're going to rotate back. But there tends to be more of a clear pathway to further advanced command position, and often that goes through ops. In your experience, not only with the moving in and out of staff positions back to the line, but also you mentioned you coming from the training chief position. Is that fairly common that you can transition to a fire chief position out of training, or is ops more of a traditional kind of pathway, or does it not matter in the fire service? You can be EMS chief or support chief and still have an equal opportunity there.
Yeah, I think ultimately you could come from any background and route yourself to the fire chief position. When I give thought to other fire chiefs that I know, or other chief level officers even, a lot of them come through training. So I back up and go, I think that the training division, training world does something for a person and is, in skill set and development that helps lead them in that direction. But I don't think that it's necessarily the path there. I think you can come through EMS, through prevention, and still wind up in the same spot.
How's your current training chief feel about you being a fire chief with vast training experience? Does he feel like, okay, chief's got my back with all this stuff because he's very detail oriented with it? Or is he like, man, I wish I was the EMS chief where I could at least get a pass here and something out of the chief's comfort zone?
Well, I'm hopeful that he's good working with me in the training division. So I think, I hope I bring Ryan some comfort that when he, hits a roadblock that he's not sure what to do with, that I have some insight to offer him, or past experiences to share with him to help him through that. I've actually worked pretty hard, as you know, Eric, the state training officers, man, that group was a passion of mine. And I brought Ryan in as our training chief, and I had the realization of, hey, I need to back off of this. It's his time now, essentially, right? So I like to pop in every once in a while and see some familiar faces, but I'm really trying to let him grow in his position the way that I did. I give a lot of thought to how I came up in my career, and I never had someone hovering over my shoulder. I wasn't forced to do any of those things, and I'm really trying to allow him that same experience. Pushing him into some things, he became the training chief. I told him he would sit on a committee at the state for certifications, just because some of that is good. It's good for you. You gain understanding. So he's probably slightly unhappy in that he gets pushed into some of those types of things, and I'm hopeful that maybe later in his career he'll understand why I was doing that.
And I asked that question about how he views being the training chief under a very successful fire chief that was training chief, tongue in cheek, because I know Ryan is completely knocking it out of the park. And he was recently recognized. And for those that don't know Ryan Reeser, Chief Ryan Reeser at Platte Valley, he was recently recognized through the Training Officers Association for his training achievement with an award. From an outside perspective, it seems like a significant accomplishment for somebody fairly junior in his tenure as training chief. Kudos to him. One of my themes this month that I'm trying to push through my content and my social media is recognition and reward. I think it's so important not to forget that our firefighters, our team members aren't just interchangeable widgets that when they wear out, we get someone to replace them, that we have to constantly foster that relationship, and part of that is recognition and reward. What strategies do you use and employ personally as a leader or as the fire chief of Platte Valley to recognize your folks for the great work that they're doing and so that they don't forget that they are valued?
Yeah. Let me start by saying I could be a lot better at that. And I think many of us could be a lot better at it because it takes time, right? Not a lot always, but it takes time. And that's what we tend to have the least of. But I do try to recognize them or make them feel valued and appreciated. So I guess a few of the things that I do, I got a lot of feedback last year. I recognized one of our members every day for however long that took on social media. So on LinkedIn and Facebook, and, I had a cool picture of them, and it was from the heart written up about that person and what they bring to our organization and why I appreciate working with them. And it turned into something, I guess, it wasn't what I intended, or I guess I didn't realize it would mean as much to those individuals as it ended up meaning. So, the feedback I got from that was essentially like they really saw how valued they were to me, which meant a lot. The rest of the time, Eric, it's simple stuff. So I like text messages because I think they're easy, but two, they're just out of the blue little messages. So if it can be something simple as I walk out and my car got washed, right? And I like to wash my car. So that's not an expectation I have on my people. But sometimes you have a busy day and I come out and my car's washed. And it's a text message to the lieutenant of, I don't know who did that, but I'm very appreciative of it. Thank you, right? Or somebody else does something for me and it's that text message later in the evening, when you start thinking about it, and it's shooting them a message to just say thanks for whatever that was. Christmas, I've made it a tradition during the holidays. Everybody gets a handwritten Christmas card from me here. And it's just, again, my opportunity to let them know what they mean to me and that I'm appreciative of what they do for our organization. And then, like I said, I could be better. I try to just make comments, or say thank you to the folks as we're passing by in the hallway or out in the bays. But, if you've heard me talk before, I love my people and I want to make sure that they know. I want to make sure they know that.
I think from what I hear you saying, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but like it's connecting with me here, that the best recognition seems to be what the most authentic thing to you is, right? It's not something that you're going to pick up in a manual that says, in order to recognize your people, you have to do X, Y, and Z, right? Or you have to give them more time off, or you have to, go to the kitchen and cook dinner for them. That may be authentic for you, but it might not be for others. And for others, handwritten notes, if it becomes a policy where you're mandating it, that's not authentic anymore.
Yeah.
I'm remembering, I know the fire service uses challenge coins just like the military does. And I was a battery commander, which is a company level command. Just battery is for an artillery unit. And at the time back then, we couldn't afford the cost of challenge coins for our battery level organization. And my first sergeant, he took a bunch of Kennedy $50, and he had this stamp, this die stamp of a number one. I don't know where he got it or why he had it. It was number one. And he would take a mallet and he would pound a number one right behind Kennedy's ear. And now, defacing U.S. currency aside, that became more meaningful to me and the members of our unit because it was something that we did. It was our coin. It wasn't a fancy coin that we paid money for, but it's what we managed to do. And that, just giving that as a token to our soldiers for a job well done, became just so meaningful because it was real. It was authentic. Yeah. It was something that had great intent behind it. So I think that's a great message that you said. And then also the thing that struck me was that you really got to try hard to do it, right? What's the saying that you spend 90% of your time on the 10% of the people that need the attention or the squeaky wheels? Right. And then that you get into this negativity bias where you're focused on solving problems and fixing things that don't work, and you forget about the things that are working well. I remember the story of somebody, I heard it along the way, carried 10 pennies in his left-hand pocket, and none of us carry change anymore, I don't think, but 10 pennies in his left pocket. And as he went through his day, every time he recognized somebody or showed appreciation, he'd move one penny over to his right-hand pocket. And if by the end of the day, all 10 pennies weren't in his right pocket, then didn't mean he did anything bad. It was just a reminder, maybe I got to do better tomorrow. So I think forcing yourself to recognize people really, not because you're trying to do it in an inauthentic way, but you just have to break free from that negativity bias.
Yep.
And also, I've heard, and I wrote this in I think it was one of my blog posts this month. I've heard people say, well, I shouldn't have to thank people because they're doing their job. And in fact, they get paid pretty well to do their job. My response to that is, who cares, right? What do you think when you hear, I shouldn't have to thank people for doing their job?
Well, like I said, I've worked for bad leaders, and to me that sounds like a bad leader, right? Where everybody here is getting a paycheck to be here, but they don't have to be here. They could be anywhere else, but they chose to be here and they choose to be here. Again, I love my people, and I say that, and I absolutely mean it. I am appreciative of everything that they do in the organization. I've got guys that spent 2 solid days out on a fire here the last couple of days, and they were spent and they worked hard. And by the end of yesterday, I did my best to walk around that scene, right? And put my hand on each person's back and be like, hey, thank you for your hard work today. And you always, from your guys, you're always going to get, chief, part of the job,
Right.
that kind of stuff. But
it's those interactions that are meaningful, right? If you're just doing it, going through the motions, and they'll see right through that.
absolutely.
But meaningful gratitude makes a difference. And honestly, there's no quota on thank yous, right? It's not like I get it when you're talking about SAVE awards and you're talking about awards for valor and other things. If you tend to be very free in giving those out and you degrade the standard or water it down, then that whole thing becomes watered down. I get that, right? But there's no quotas on thank yous, right? If you give 5 away, that doesn't mean they mean less. So yeah, I think that becomes, frankly, more of an excuse of why you're not doing it when you say people are just merely doing their job, instead of finding the reason why you should do it, right? Like, talk yourself into the thing rather than talking yourself out of the thing.
Yeah.
As you look towards the future, what are some of your goals that are kind of at the forefront of your mind for Platte Valley over the next couple of years?
Okay. Well, we've worked hard over the last 3 to really change our organization and change our culture. Culture has been the main topic here because I believe that's what keeps people, right? The advertisement that we have an opening and we're looking for firefighters is what gets people. But once they're in the house, what they feel and what they see is what keeps them here. So we've pushed through. We've gotten to where I feel like we've defined culture in our organization, which was important to me. So our next steps with that and goals for me is that I get our people to where they're protecting that and they're holding each other accountable to it. So I just want to start with that because that to me is the most important thing at our organization as we start to move forward. Past that, there's growth hopefully on the horizon for our community. So it's preparing for that, right? So we've got good budget years. Our organization's very oil and gas funded, so you got to take advantage of the good years to plan for the future. So it's planning for another station potentially down the road, not anytime real soon, but planning for that down the road. And then really developing our people. And I think if I had to say 2 main goals, it's that culture piece, and then it's developing our people so that they're ready for the future, whatever that might be. If we added another station someday, that's more officers, it's more engineers, and it's getting our people ready for that stuff today so that when that day comes, 1, we're ready, and 2, they're ready for the potential in their career that I'm assuming they're all hoping for at some point, right? So, other than that, it's maintaining relationships with those that we work with, our auto aid neighbors and others from around the state. Those relationships are important to me as well.
Yeah, and I really like what you're saying there, whether it be relationships or culture. Just to reinforce what you're saying about culture, you said, and I'm certainly not trying to correct you here, but you said we worked hard to define the culture. I think you are defining the culture merely by what you're doing, right? So when you thank your firefighters out at that brush fire for kicking butt that day and when working hard, you're defining the culture. When you made the hard call that you said hurt your heart to, invite somebody maybe to take an opportunity elsewhere for the betterment of the department, you're defining the culture. when you are recognizing that leadership is a relationship with people and you need to foster that relationship, you're defining the culture. So it's less of a written definition that you then say, okay, now we're going to do it. It's more your culture is defined by all those other things. And I obviously you get that, but I think it's worth noting that that's really what builds a great culture, is just simply approaching things with a mindset for growth and doing good work. Can I ask you one last question if you have time before we get out of here? So do you have potentially a defining moment in your career, something that stands out to you that has defined who you are as a leader or as a fire chief or just a firefighter in the fire service, something that really just sticks out that was the thing that you can look back on, maybe even a small thing, right?
Yeah, Eric, I'm gonna back up. Three years ago, when I kind of started this chief path, like I said, I was given the opportunity to lead in the way that I wanted to lead. And I could sit in a room with a lot of people that I look up to and I respect, that have mentored me over the years, and they would do it differently than I would. But when I was given that opportunity, I said I was going to do it the way that I would do it. I think, though there were challenges in that, I think it really reinforced who I thought that I was and what I had to bring. Hopefully that sounds right.
Oh, yeah.
When I say it, but there's a lot of stuff that brought me to that moment. And there's been a lot of stuff since that moment as well. But I think, that I was given an opportunity to lead. I did it in my way, and we're seeing some really good success in our organization. And so I think it just, for me, it solidified that the way that I believe leadership should be is right, I guess, is a good thing. Not that my way is the only way, sure, right? But I think it just reinforced that, like I say, I love my people. Relationships are important to me, and that those things truly do matter and work when you're in a leadership position.
And I assume that like nothing stops at that point, right? Like you don't just say, well, I've made it to this point and now I get to do it and it's all downhill from here. Like every day is hard work, right?
Yeah, it's not downhill, I can assure you that. There are, obviously challenges, and I have made a million mistakes, and you learn, and I will not repeat those in the future, and learn that there might be a better way than I thought to do it again later down the road, but absolutely not. Yeah, it doesn't stop there for sure.
Yeah, that's a great way to end for us today. So Jim, thanks so much for joining me today. You are one of the leaders that I actually, even though I'm not in the fire service, I look up to for inspiration. And as a leadership practitioner, I see the things that you're doing and the dedication that you're putting into your department and your leadership journey. And it's just inspiring for me, and hopefully it inspires others. For our listeners, if you found today's episode insightful, please share it with anyone that you think might find benefit from it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast on whatever platform that you use. For additional tools and insights for leadership, please visit my website at convergentimpact.com. And then, as always, until next time, lead well, take care of your people, and keep setting the example.